It's pretty amazing to see what this small form factor Linux-powered mini gaming PC can do with Bazzite OS installed. What's going on, everybody? It's ETAPRIME back here again. Today we're going to be putting together a small form factor, basically console-sized Linux-powered gaming PC that really puts down some amazing 1080p performance. Recently on the channel, I did a couple videos showing off an operating system known as Bazzite. This is a Linux gaming operating system, and it has worked out really well on handhelds like the Legion Go and the ROG Ally. By the way, I did a full install tutorial for your handheld. I'll leave a link in the description. It supports a ton of different hardware, ton of different systems, and if you're looking to get kind of that Steam Deck experience, this is perfect. Plus, when we're done gaming, we've got a full desktop interface. Heading to their download section. From their drop-down, we can select our hardware from desktop to home theater PC, Steam Deck, Lenovo Legion Go, ROG Ally, GPD, and other handhelds. We're going to be using the desktop variant, obviously. And from here, it supports AMD and actually Intel Arc right now. If you're interested in checking out a full Arc build with this operating system installed, let me know in the comments below. Unfortunately, with NVIDIA, we're just not going to get all of those Steam Deck OS features that we want due to NVIDIA drivers right now. So for this setup here, we're using AMD. Our environment is going to be KDE, just like Steam OS, and we want to be in gaming mode. So this is exactly what we're going to be using for this build. Again, I did an install tutorial showing you how to do this on the Legion Go, but this will kind of transfer over to basically anything as long as you choose the right image from the get-go. But in this video, we're going to be putting together a small form factor Linux gaming PC using this operating system. So obviously, we want to go as small as possible with this APU build without breaking the bank, so I opted to use the brand new A1 box GM100. Very cheap mini ITX case that supports a flex power supply. It comes in white or black, and over on Amazon, they're about $42, but I'm sure you could find this much cheaper on AliExpress if you don't mind waiting it out. Personally, love the overall design, very minimalistic, and it's going to be perfect for a small form factor build. This is only coming in at 4.6 liters. And one of the best things here is we do have enough room for a 72mm cooler, which means the Wraith Spire that comes with the Ryzen 7 8700G does fit in here quite nicely. One of the downsides to building mini ITX with AM5 platforms is the motherboard price. They can get quite expensive when you go with the higher end models. So for these G series APUs like the 8600G and the 8700G, I've been using the A620 mini ITX boards, and this one just happens to be ASRock's new Lightning Wi-Fi version. This thing is coming in around $135, really hard to beat right now when you take a look at other AM5 prices on the market. When it comes to storage, I opted to use a 1TB Kingston Renegade NVMe SSD, but you can go with any M.2 if you wanted to. A lot of them are pretty cheap over on Amazon right now, 1TB to 2TB, but this Renegade is one that I had waiting around for a build, so I figured I'd go ahead and throw it in. For the CPU, or the APU rather, I opted to use the Ryzen 7 8700G along with the stock Spire cooler that comes along with it. It's going to keep this APU nice and cool, and it's also going to fit inside of our case, the GM100. We'll go ahead and put this 8700G APU in the motherboard, and if you're not familiar with this chip, based on Zen 4, we've got 8 cores, 16 threads, and CPU performance is on par with the 7700, but we've got a much more powerful iGPU because this uses the Radeon 780M. 12 compute units based on RDNA 3, and it clocks up to 2900 MHz. RAM speed is really important when it comes to these iGPUs, and you definitely want to be running in dual channel. And this is the fastest RAM that I've tested with the 8700G so far. This is Kingston's new Fury running at 8,000 megatransfers per second. It is the RGB version, so we've got a little bit of RGB up top, and it's a 32 gig kit, so we've got two 16 gig sticks. But now we've got the motherboard assembled. I've just installed that stock Wraith cooler that comes along with the 8700G. Remember, if you opt to go with the lower end 8600G, it is the smaller cooler, but it definitely handles that chip quite well because we've got less cores and less power over there. Initially, with this new GM100 case, I was a little worried that that Spire cooler wouldn't fit with the side panel on, but it actually goes in here very nicely. Just going to set it on down, and that side panel is almost going to mate up with the top of the cooler itself, And personally, I don't mind because we've got a mesh side panel with the GM100, so it's going to pull all of that cool air into the case. And I'm not worried about thermal throttling with the Spire cooler. I'm not going to be doing any overclocking, and even if I did, it would probably just be on the iGPU side. This thing will handle it. Getting real close to finishing this build up, the last thing we need to install is the power supply, then we can wire everything up. And for the power supply, with this GM100 case, it supports a flex power supply. I went with this 300 watt, they're about $34. I've used 2 of these in the past, they're still running strong, not very loud, and we don't need that much power for this APU. Around 150 watts max. I would say if you're really going to get down to it, make sure your power supply at least supports 180 watts if you're just using the iGPU and CPU. Now, it would be really nice if this power supply was modular, but luckily these newer versions have all black cables instead of the red, brown, and yellow like we used to have with the same power supply. It was a bit unsightly, but we've got a little extra room in here, so I think we can get this cable management looking pretty decent. And yeah, once we've got everything wired up, all of those cables sit right up front, not obstructing any of the airflow into the case from the side panel. But overall, it went together pretty easily, and I think it looks pretty good. I still need to install Bazzite on that 1TB SSD. So I've just went through the motions. I've got the operating system installed, just did it from a USB drive. We've got that hard drive light up front and our RGB. Throw that side panel on, and yeah, I do think it looks pretty good. Now this is only coming in at around 4.6 liters, so it is a very small form factor PC. And of course, we did throw some pretty fast RAM at this because when it comes to these APUs, it loves that fast RAM. And I think we're going to see some great performance out of this operating system on this mini PC. Alright, so here's Bazzite running on this mini PC we just put together. As you can see, we've got that Steam Deck interface or gamepad UI. Now, of course, we can do this in Windows, but we're not going to have access to our performance menu over here. This gives us a lot of great features with Linux that we just don't get with Windows. From here, we can disable the frame limit, enable VRR. HDR is supported by this little APU. We can allow tearing, half rate shading. Unfortunately, there's no manual GPU clock or TDP control directly from performance. We could install something here known as simple TDP control, but since we're using a desktop PC, everything's going to be controlled from the BIOS, and I'm letting this thing go up as high as we can. I have taken the RAM up to 8000 megahertz, enabled that XMP profile. Scaling filter, we could do FSR across the board. So yeah, we've basically got everything that we do on the Steam Deck except for that manual GPU clock and TDP control from performance. And another great thing is we've got a nice little installer once we get Bazzite up and running. It'll allow us to easily install third-party applications like Urcdkey. So if we wanted to go through and install something like Animation Changer, Audio Loader, Audio Flat Packs, Auto Suspend, all of this can be enabled on this PC. Let me take this down just a bit, give you a look here from our settings, System, Bazzite, OS version, we're on 40, Ryzen 7 8700G, up to 5.2 gigahertz, 8 cores, 16 threads, and we've got 32 gigs of RAM, along with that 780M iGPU. 4.6 compatible profile, and from display, we can adjust the resolution, so automatically set resolution, or we can go up to 1440. I'm at 1920 by 1080 at 60. Actually, while I'm gaming, I'm going to change my game capture to 120, so we will see 1920 by 1080 at 120 hertz. Automatically scale the image. And right now, I do have some games installed. I'm waiting for a few more to download. But I did mention we've got a full desktop interface. We'll just go to our power settings, switch to desktop. And on the initial boot in desktop mode, it's going to give us this little setup wizard. It's really great because basically what we can do here is just pick and choose what we want to install. We can go with Urcdkey, we can go with EMU Deck. You can install different applications. It's really easy to use. That way you kind of don't get lost. You've got a lot from the beginning. If you want to install some different web browsers, some Linux games, there's a ton of different features that we can enable or disable. Basically, we can automatically download all of this if you want to get it up and going. But you could always use Terminal. I mean, it's full Linux. And we've also got access to Discover, just like we do on the Steam Deck. So we can go through here, pick and choose different applications, install GIMP. If you want to go to your gaming section, we've got an action section or even emulators. So let's say I wanted to install the standalone version of the Dolphin emulator directly from here. We'll just click on it, install, just like we would on the Steam Deck. So I mean, other than having just a nice little gaming setup here running Linux with a great gamepad UI interface, we've also got a full desktop operating system. But I'm sure a lot of you are here strictly for gaming, so let's check out some more games running on this mini PC. Here we have Helldivers 2 1080p medium settings with FSR set to balanced, and you might notice that we're locked at 60. I've turned VSync off with this, and this is something that I've seen in the past with other Linux operating systems. If I rebooted, there's a chance we could kind of break out of this. I've got VSync off, I've got an unlocked frame rate, but we're right there at 60. It's a bit odd, but again, I have seen this in the past. Either way, it's still running really well. Next up, we've got Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, and one of the big reasons I wanted to test this, and a few more that you're going to see in this video, is the addition of FSR 3.1 and AMD's Fluid Motion or Frame Gen built into the game settings. Right now, we're at 1080 medium with AMD Frame Gen on, and we're seeing an average of around 64 FPS with this game, which is great on an iGPU, and this is a main area that I usually like to test. There's a lot going on right now, and on Windows, we're kind of hard-pressed to run this over 60 at 1080 with any of the settings, so to see this running in Linux like this is really great. Next up, we've got Mortal Kombat 1, medium settings, 1080p, FSR set to balance, and you'll kind of see that across the board. FSR is something that's really going to help out with these iGPUs. We're not working with a super powerful graphics card here. We've got built-in graphics, and total system power consumption on this setup here, average across the board with all the games that I've tested, is around 93 watts. Now, we've seen it jump up quite high when caching shaders with all 8 cores and 16 threads, but I did test it plugged into the wall with the kilowatt meter, so we can take a look at power consumption also by the end of the video. Forza Horizon 5, this one does perform better in Windows. Right now we're at 1080 medium, no FSR, no fidelity CAS or anything like that. We're seeing an average of around 83, and just to put it into perspective for you, same system in Windows 11 running this game with the same settings, I'm seeing an average of around 112 FPS. So yeah, I mean, it's quite a bit, but it's still very playable here. I'm not complaining whatsoever. It's not dropping under 60, very smooth, and it does look great at 1080 medium. Cyberpunk 2077, we're at 1080 low, FSR set to balanced, and on any of these iGPUs, this is exactly how I usually run it. Sometimes in Windows, I go into the settings and take it down to very low, basically, because once you go to the low preset, there are a few settings still at medium, but we're just at that low preset here, and I'm seeing an average of around 78 FPS, which is kind of on par with what Windows does with those very low settings I was just talking about. In my experience, I've actually had much better luck in Linux with Cyberpunk 2077 on these iGPUs than I have in Windows. Spiderman Miles Morales, another one of those games that was recently updated for FSR 3.1 plus AMD Frame Gen, so I had to throw it in. And yeah, at 1080 medium with FSR set to balanced and Frame Gen on, we're seeing an average of around 86 FPS. And when it comes to AMD's Frame Gen that's been added to a lot of these games recently, I've heard a lot about ghosting, and with this game and Ratchet and Clank, it's not something that I really noticed. But there is one game where I did notice a bunch of ghosting going on, and that game was Horizon Forbidden West. But, you know, this is one that's given me a lot of issues on integrated graphics. We had to drop it down to 900p, low settings, FSR 3.1, balanced with Frame Gen on. We cannot lock this down at 60, and there's a lot of ghosting going on in Windows while playing this game at the same settings, but using AMD's Fluid Motion frames from Adrenaline software, we do see better performance over there. And the final game I just wanted to show off real quick, which I personally just got into, this is one that I didn't play on PS4, Ghost of Tsushima. Right now, we're at 1080p medium, FSR set to balanced using 3.1 and Frame Gen. I'm seeing averages in the mid-70s, and I've gotten a lot further through the game since recording this bit here on this mini PC. Absolutely loving this game, and even in the harder to render areas, like even on horseback, we're seeing averages in the mid-70s. So yeah, that Frame Gen is really helping out. Overall, I think I'm seeing some pretty decent performance out of this mini PC using Bazzite, and of course we could have went a little bigger with the DGPU, but I love these iGPUs and wanted to keep it super small form factor. We're under 4.6 liters here, And with Linux installed, it really does kind of feel like a couch PC, especially with that gamepad UI interface. Love the look of this unit. All white, I think looks really good. They do offer a black version in this case, and if you're interested in putting something like this together, I will leave links to everything I used in the description below. But that's going to wrap it up for this one. If you've got any questions, let me know in the comments below. And like always, thanks for watching.